because there really is no labor mobility problems that we've seen or encountered, and certainly the number of complaints that have come forward, both from British Columbia, Alberta, and in fact the nation, would tell us that it's not significant enough a problem to actually put together something that would be as risky as a trade agreement. You know, I think if you look at some of the international stuff, there is some relevance. This, I guess, in past have called upon TILMA to be son of NAFTA. There certainly are some similarities in this, but I don't think the purpose for TILMA is very clear to anybody. And regardless of the number of questions we ask, we simply aren't getting the answers, or people don't know the answers yet.
So what are you going to do with the legal opinions here?
Well, I'm hoping, I guess if we had it our way, that it would cause the government to actually slow down at the very minimum and start to think about whether or not the opinion that we have, and more, I think that more important, the concerns that some major organizations, not just unions, I mean the UBCM, the FCM, you know, all kinds of organizations have come out and said, you know, we can't, in particular, I think the whole local government thing for me is important. If in fact our economy as it is right now in northern British Columbia in particular, where local governments want to get outside the box and support local business and do some things with them, if we agree with nothing, we do agree that if the TILMA's passed, that's not possible for local governments to do that. So those kinds of things, and I suspect that's why the FCM or the UBCM actually has some significant problems with it. So the answer to the question is, I would hope they slow down. I'm not overly confident they will. We're facing 9 or 10 bills now that are going to face closure by the 29th. This is one of them, in my view, but I don't think that there's any intention for anybody to do anything. Whatever we have to do, I think the onus is on us to make it happen. And other organizations will do the same. The unfortunate part of this is any action that we may take around this bill or others certainly won't be in place before the next provincial election. And that, to me, is obscene.
So you're stopping short of saying that you intend to challenge this legislation in the courts?
No, I'm not stopping short. We don't go out and get legal opinion because we had nothing to do that day. We get a legal opinion because we want to know what our position is. And I think that our members, from my organization in particular, expect us to do with something with that if we're not satisfied that the government is at all paying attention. It wouldn't, we haven't developed that strategy fully yet. We just got the opinion back and we're talking about those things, but certainly any move that we make from here will be significant. But we're, I guess, not optimistic, but hopeful that the government will take some of these things under consideration and perhaps move this off the docket. Maybe there needs to be more time to think about it, to talk about it, and perhaps that needs to happen after the next provincial election. I'm not sure what the consequence, but we don't put lawsuits in place if in fact government's actually going to make a move to change something.
Is there a parallel news conference happening today in Edmonton? I mean, this thing is illegal in BC, vis-a-vis an agreement with Alberta. Is it reciprocated on the other side?
Well, I'm not sure what's going on in the rest of the country. The only thing I know what's going on is what's going on in Prince George this morning and what's going on here right now, because I've been in both places. But there are other agreements that are being talked about, and Stephen may want to make comment around the Atlantica and other kinds of agreements that are happening. But it's fair to say that BC was actually the one that kind of moved us down this path, and therefore we're taking particular interest. We will take interest in other interprovincial trade agreements because we are a national organization and have some comment in that regard. But
may I crystallize the intent of my question, sir? This agreement is bad in and of itself, period, or it's bad for BC?
I think it's a bad agreement. I would say that it's a bad agreement from the footing. The earlier question around whether or not you could actually put amendments to it, I believe, in my view, this is not a legal view, that the footing of this legislation is flawed and therefore cannot be repaired.
Do you agree with that, Mr. Shrybman?
Yes, yes, I should have put it that straight, in those straightforward terms. Yeah, no, it's fundamentally flawed and can't be repaired. It's the wrong type of approach, too. It's a shotgun, too. Unfortunately, an unconstitutional one at that, to kill a fly.
And that applies just as much in Alberta as it does.
Absolutely, and actually we're doing an opinion on Bill 1, which is the statute which would implement TILMA in Alberta, which isn't moving as quickly in that province as it is here, and there's been more scope for debate in that province, but that'll be available in a week or two. But let me just add that no other province, though, has, though there's certainly discussions underway, I believe, between Ontario and Quebec. This has stopped at the Saskatchewan border. The government in Saskatchewan, the previous government in Saskatchewan, held hearings into the prospect of Saskatchewan joining the club created by Alberta and BC. And having heard from the people of the province, great democratic exercise of public hearing, even the Saskatchewan party thought better of its commitment and turned away from it. So, one of the problems this regime suffers from is an absence of a commitment by either the governments of Alberta or British Columbia to have a candid conversation with people about why a measure like this is needed and what implications it will ultimately have. Alberta's gone down that road much further, and with the benefit of the understanding that's acquired in that regard, it stepped away. And we're convinced that's why you don't see other provinces jumping on this bandwagon either.
I guess the one point that I would make in my travels that British Columbians are asking, and I would ask myself, because that's the only answers I ever get, is if this is such a great piece of legislation, if it's so good for British Columbians, why hasn't it been debated in the House for months and months? Why isn't it in mainstream media? Why aren't we talking about it all the time? Some of my friends in the media have had as difficult a time getting information on the TILMA as we have. So it can't be that great if the government itself is not putting it out there for British Columbians to actually see, so that they can be proud of this. There's been no talk in the House. There's been no talk anywhere. I'm not sure because they don't have the answers to everything, but if it's that great, why aren't British Columbians absolutely thrilled to have it? If you go to most communities in British Columbia and talk about the TILMA, they wonder actually what you are talking about. Families that are going through some of the crises in this province aren't sitting around reading interprovincial trade agreements, nor they're reading the NAFTA or the AIT. So if it was that great, why aren't we telling people about it? That's the first kind of factor for me.
In your opinion, who stands to gain the most if this legislation is passed?
If I had to guess, it would be multinationals, very large corporations, and the biggest loser would be local governments. That would be my guess.
Do you have any thoughts around how this would reach into collective agreements or bargaining?
Well, I guess it depends on what the focus of the legislation really means. If it means that you need to actually drive qualifications to the lowest common denominator, to the floor, my guess is that nobody wants to make the kind of qualifications at the high end. It will have a significant impact on collective agreements because the law, I'm not a lawyer, but the law will supersede collective agreement in almost every case, I believe.
Some people have speculated that this is just greasing the skids for the Security and Prosperity Partnership. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, you know, I would think that there's a connection, but there's a connection everywhere, it seems, with trade, and certainly that's another whole new topic, and Stephen's been working a little, I'm not sure who's been working on it, but I know that Maud Barlow and the Council of Canadians, we've done a little bit of work on it, but it's just difficult enough just trying to figure out one at a time when you're overwhelmed with 9 or different bills. I think it's all running in the same direction. Certainly there are pieces that actually go together very well. But they're not the only two. The TILMA and the SPP are not the only two.